It turns into like, hey, this is unfair. I want it to be unfair. I know that's not very popular, but I would rather leave someone out in the 4-team system than being inviting to somebody that has done nothing for 12 games and then thinks they have some kind of argument to be competing for a national championship.
Hello and welcome in. It's always college football. I'm your host, Greg McElroy, and we are very happy to have you here with us. We have college football playoff season going on right now. We have incredible matchups all over the board. We're not that far away from crowning a national champion. We have a lot of momentum going on right now. Yes, Selection Day was met with criticism. It was met with chaos, subjectivity, issues with the playoff format, issues with the conference championship format. I'm good with all of that, and we can fix college football. We can fix it. We just got to learn what we don't know just yet. I think sometimes we get so caught up in, well, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Well, did we know that this was going to be a problem? Did we know there were going to be challenges when we instituted the 12-team playoff? Because I think a lot of people looked at it and said, well, the 12-team playoff will solve everything. I mean, it'll be a breeze. If you are on the bubble, man, you're in. Well, now those teams that are on the bubble are saying the format is messed up. How we're deciding the teams are messed up. The changes from year to year as far as the criteria is concerned is messed up. And who can blame anybody for their frustration? We all want what's perfect, but the beauty about college football is that it will never be perfect. It will never be fair. I know that sounds hard. That's difficult to consume. I get that. It'll never be perfect unless all 136 teams that are playing set up and play in a tournament in which you crown a worthy champion. It'll never be fair, but that's part of what makes us different from that of the NFL. We don't have a draft. There are built-in advantages for blue blood brands. There's a million reasons why college football is different and subjective and fun. But I can understand why people are frustrated with it right now. However, now is the time to be celebrating the sport. We are close, ladies and gentlemen, to getting some massive games underway, legacy games, games that have high stakes, great matchups. We are close to having some incredible results that will be coming our way very soon. So I'm asking everybody just to put some things on the back burner for the time being, because January is not that far away. And in January, in the off season, we will spend ample time figuring out how can we make our sport better? How can we make our postseason format more fair? How can we make it more consumable? What tweaks should we make? There's plenty of time for that. But now is not that time. Now is the time to talk games. Now is the time to talk about matchups. Now is the time to talk about conference championships and what the college football playoff might ultimately look like. So to help us do that today, we're going to welcome in Ryen Russillo, long friend of the program, long friend of mine, guy who I have always loved watching, have developed a relationship with. When I first got in the business, he was one of the earliest people that I kind of got to know by just doing his show. At the time, he was with SVP. He's been with Cannell. He's been with a lot of different people, but recently he's gone out and he now is venturing into this new frontier. He's been in the podcast game for a while, but he has launched a terrific show, the Ryen Russillo Show on DraftKings. You can go and check it out. Subscribe to it on the YouTube page. Subscribe to it from a podcast platform. He does an amazing job, and he's just like you and me. He loves the game. So we'll ask him about how we can fix things. We'll ask him about what he would do. We'll ask him about this playoff and the 12 teams that are in it and how he thinks it might all shake out. So we really look forward to our visit with him. Before we tell you a little more about Ryen Russillo, I want to first encourage you to go ahead and subscribe to our podcast on the podcast platform of your choosing. You can also subscribe to the ESPN College Football YouTube page. So let's kick things off. A great conversation with Ryen Russillo. Okay, he's Ryen Russillo, has long been just the everyman as it relates to sports content. Like, there's no one that I relate to better. I don't know a ton about NBA. I don't know a ton about some of the pro sports, but I watch Ryen. I'm like, all right, I'm good now. I can have a water cooler conversation about pretty much everything. And I absolutely love everything you've always put out, Rhino. Appreciate you so much for doing this. And of course, if you want to check out Ryan's podcast, it's the Ryen Russillo Show. He's partnered with Barstool. He's done an amazing job for a very long time. So we're always grateful to get his perspective. So Rhino, how we doing, my friend?
I'm great. What an intro, man. I really appreciate that. I had no idea you liked me that much. So thank you.
Well, I just liked you because I disliked Cannell so much for so long. So it naturally forced me into becoming Team Russillo, and it just worked out. It's just the way it happened, I suppose. But we love you, man. It's always great to get your perspective. Like, you are not in the weeds with us in college football. You watch it, you're a fan, and I think you give great perspective. But I was curious your thoughts, because I've kind of gone to you. It's like, this is not that difficult. This is fairly easy. I remember you having that conversation a while back between an undefeated team, or a one-loss team, and a two-loss team. I believe it was Bama and Ohio State. You're like, Bama had one loss, Ohio State had two. This should not be that difficult. So when you saw the committee's release this year and the college football playoff field, what was your immediate reaction?
I was disappointed for Notre Dame, but I totally understood it. And what I said on my show is that if you look at the system, first of all, we're year 2 into this system. So for anyone that, like, there's just a lot of propaganda. There's a lot of packaging of certain things. It's like, oh, hey, Bama is the first 3-loss team to ever be in the playoff. You're like, oh, I wonder what happened. I wonder what's happened over the last few decades for this to have never happened before. Oh, wait, we have 12 teams? Or, hey, what happened in Florida State? What they did to Florida State? It's like, well, was that 4 teams and now it's 12? So I just think there's a lot of dishonesty in the discussion. Granted, I'm willing to admit that I can be plenty wrong about a lot of stuff when you cover sports for long enough and you have these stronger opinions. But I think Notre Dame is one of the top 12 teams. But the string of circumstances that they had to face for this have to happen was probably a rare scenario moving forward. They have the head-to-head loss with a team that's right next to them, and I never quite understood why the committee, especially when they said November 19th, that Miami and Notre Dame were not in their same pods. Because I've done the mock selection process when it was 4 teams. When I was at ESPN, I did it back-to-back years, so I thought I had a pretty good perspective on how they did it. Miami and Notre Dame should have been in similar pods even back then. So now we get to the point where they're finally in the same pod. You've lost the head-to-head. You have a schedule. You've won 10 in a row. You've looked really impressive, but you've also had, some of these bottom teams of the Big Ten are some of the worst teams in college football, while you have Bama going through what they went through, which I know you'll want to talk about. And then you also have this unbelievably stupid circumstance where all these conferences have expanded, where they're not even conferences anymore. They're just collections of scheduling agreements. So no one's having the same experience. And you have 5, 6, and 2 teams where your tiebreaker is so stupid that Miami's out of the conference championship game and a 5-loss Duke team is in it, then wins, then isn't the automatic qualifier, which opens up a door for a second group of 5. So I totally get it, Notre Dame. You should be upset, but outraged, conspiracy, it's ESPN. Like, I've heard the same thing every year, going all the way to my first year at ESPN in 2006. And even though I haven't been there in 6 years, it's the same thing over and over again. And what always happens is it's this one aggrieved fan base that thinks this is the only time a team has been disappointed and left out. And I understand how mad you are. You were higher in the rankings. I don't think a committee did a good job of expressing their thoughts with this one. But when you really dig into the whole thing, when you started the show, I was so happy that you were like, where's this momentum that Bama is all of a sudden out of this thing because they lost the conference championship game? And I was sitting there watching you going, hey, maybe this is why Greg is having me on, because we're too aligned on this stuff.
That's definitely what we want. We want complete agreement on everything. That makes for terrific podcast content and radio content and television content, because debate shows have not taken over our world. Not at all.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, like, I think you and I see it the same way. Like, I'm sick to my stomach about Notre Dame, but the thing that's frustrated me so much, and I think you hit the nail on the head, is people are citing 2023 as a reference. People are citing 2015 as a reference. People are citing yesteryear and citing all these. Well, they were inconsistent with this. How come it didn't apply here? In the 12-team playoff era, compared to the 14 playoff era, in the 14 playoff era, you had to thread the needle. Like, we're comparing teams with no warts. Now in the 12-team playoff era, you're comparing teams that are obviously flawed. And the reasonings for why they're flawed, or from their fan base, why they're not flawed, are more of a reach than they were in the 14 playoff era. So I feel like the debate has even gotten stronger now more than ever before, because if you didn't win your conference championship in the 14 playoff, you were kind of like, all right, I get it. Now it's like, whoa, hang on, but they didn't do this, but they didn't do that. So how do we fix it, I guess, Ryan, in your eyes?
Go back to 4, which isn't going to happen. I mean, 16 is going to be awful. You're going to have Arizona and Michigan fans. You know, Arizona was a feisty little crew. I don't know that Michigan did anything all year that makes me feel good about them. And then their fan bases next year with a 16-team system is going to be like, I can't believe this. Like, I can't wait until a team is actually pointing out their 40th in strength of record and feeling like that's some kind of win. Like, I've seen all the BYU stuff this year, so just add 7 more teams. Like, I don't know what BYU is doing other than what I guess they feel is necessary to do. Like, I couldn't wait for the Manny Diaz post game because I was like, this is going to be so bad. But I don't blame him. You know, what's he supposed to do? Go, hey, we got the 5 losses. We're probably not going to be in this thing. But then to be like, nobody has a win like this. Nobody has a win like this. Like, dude, plenty of teams have a win like that. So it's not going to go back to 4. That's fine. Like any system, when you go, oh, hey, what's happening here? I'd have to see it play out 10 years before I felt like there was something that, you know, you're asking me to like project what kind of flaws we could see with this. And I'm not saying like that's exactly what you're doing, but I want people to be left out. I want people to be disappointed. This is a chance for a national championship. And whether we're going back to the old BCS arguments about like Michigan State, that Iowa year where they hadn't really played anybody, and it turns into like, hey, this is unfair. I want it to be unfair. I know that's not very popular, but I would rather leave someone out when the 4-team system than being inviting to somebody that has done nothing for 12 games and then thinks they have some kind of argument to be competing for a national championship. You know, look, I love the Ohio State-Michigan game, just like everybody else. But when they bring you in to the shoe or they bring you into Ann Arbor and they're like, this is for everything, you're like, it isn't. I loved going to LSU, Alabama. It's my favorite game that I'll ever go to. I love it to death. I've been a million times since my first time in 2008. And that game used to mean not only for the division, but for the conference. It was kind of like this elimination game, except for the one year where they had the rematch in 2011 because Oklahoma State was the only other option, which, you know, whatever. It meant a little bit more. And so I know I'm not going to go back to that, but I'm basically asking fan bases to accept when your argument is this weak. You know, just because we're at 12 teams, this doesn't actually mean that you hit the qualifiers that you think you do. And again, to your point, like, sure, you can throw a strength of record. I could put together a graphic for all sorts of teams that both argues what would seem to be like a really good case if I cherry pick, and I could also argue against a ton of these teams if I wanted to, because I've watched most of these. Well, I guess I've watched all of them. It's just, you know, how many times have I watched them? 4 or 5 games. So to fix it, I'm giving you an answer that's never going to happen, and that would be let's go in the other direction instead of inviting more, but that's not what's going to happen.
In a perfect world, we would reduce the field and you would have play-ins within the conference, and that's how you make it to the title game. But I don't think that's exactly where we're going to go, but we'll see. I think the first order of business, though, and it doesn't necessarily apply to Notre Dame because they're not in the league, we can clean up conference championship weekend, I feel like, Ryan. I feel like that's something that can be done quickly. And instead of a conference championship game, what if we started to look down the rabbit hole of, hey, why don't we do an SEC playoff game where it's SEC branded? They get to keep every dollar of that game, and you take Bama and play them against Texas, the highest ranked team that's out, the lowest ranked team that's in. You play those 2 teams. The winner goes to the college football playoff. What if in the Big Ten, I know this year's weird, and even the top 3 being in the top 5, it doesn't really work. But if, let's just say USC was 10th, Michigan was, say, 14th, hey, they played in the regular season, but now this one's for all the marbles, winner makes it. You already had that in the Big 12 where one team was in, one team was out. But what if it was BYU against Utah? That team makes it, Texas Tech's already in the field. And then finally in the ACC, you just take Miami, you play them against Virginia, winner gets in. I just feel like there's a way of reimagining conference championship weekend, can make it more consumable, give it higher stakes, and yet still give the conferences a ton of money that they don't have to share with the rest of college football. How would you feel about that?
Well, you're on the right path, and I think you probably have more insight into this, especially with playing in that conference, and I'm sure your relationship with it is good, in that, all right, if we're going to come up with any solutions, it has to be that the conferences are going to be looking out for themselves first and foremost, because that's what we've learned. People can talk about a college football commissioner. It's like nobody actually wants somebody to be in charge of this to tell them what they can and can't do. I don't know how to fix the conference part of it because it's a joke. Texas A&M's experience isn't even close to Alabama's experience. So I'm all for some extra kind of conference branded play-in game that maybe does a better job of deciding it. But if you're basing it on the standings, I start to worry about, like Indiana last year. Indiana's the best story in college football this year. Cignetti deserves all the praise. I couldn't stand him last year. I couldn't stand him. I couldn't stand the program. And I was like, do you realize they're playing 7 of the 8 worst teams in the Big Ten? And then it was Ohio State, so it was like, and then I think there was one that was in the middle. So I'd ask you, like, would you be concerned with this expansion? Would they kind of deserve all this stuff for just this arms race that we've had with the major conferences? Would you think there's a better way to figure out, like, no one wants to go to voting, the old BCS tiebreakers that you had in the SEC division stuff that you had in the Big 12 that goes back to like Texas, Oklahoma, and Texas Tech in 08. Is there a way that you think you can at least get a fair representation of what the best teams are to even play in that game? Because I love what you're saying. I just want to make sure that it's not a scheduling error that's getting to play in one of these games, while like a team like Texas, like say, would be out because, they had, whether it's conference standings or the overall standings, it sounds like you would go conference standings.
I don't know exactly how we'd solve it yet. This is the very beginning of the rabbit hole that I plan on going on. I
like it. Hey, look, if it's extra games and the conference can keep the money, then you're probably on the right track.
It seems like we're heading in that direction, which leads us to the next question with Notre Dame. At some point, this was the first time I feel like Notre Dame's actually been on the receiving end of consequences for doing their own thing, which is unfortunate. And I do think, like you said, it was a bit of a perfect storm. Do I think they're a top 5 team? Yes. I think you're a top 3 team. There's 3 teams.
You think they're the third team? Wow.
Honestly, there's 3 teams in college football right now I would pick to beat Notre Dame: Indiana, Ohio State, and Georgia. Everyone else, I think I'd take Notre Dame. I really feel that strongly about how good they are. But does this make them think twice about their current circumstances? Whether it's the ACC scheduling agreement that allows them to play 5 games against ACC teams every single year, or being in a conference, or how they're structuring their scheduling with tough teams being in the first 2 weeks. Like, what changes do you think will this lead to for Notre Dame when they look into the future?
I've never been one of those guys that's like, oh, well, that's what you get. It just seems that so much of the commentary is like, you probably grew up hating Notre Dame, so you're going to use this. Is not
I'm Irish. No, I very much liked Notre Dame, believe it or not.
I'm talking about
you. So it's probably not the right one to ask, because there is a very soft spot in my heart for Notre Dame. It's actually my 6-year-old's favorite team. So yes, we are pro Notre Dame in our household.
I guess I should have meant like the grand you, not specific to you. I love Notre Dame when I was a kid. I mean, I was in my dorm room heartbroken in '93 when that kick went in, because I was at Vermont and the kicker was a UVM soccer player that transferred to Boston College and hit that game-winning kick. So on UVM's campus, it was like a win for us without a football team, which is why I've been able to adopt LSU, because we didn't have a team. Even though you can totally make fun of my fandom, which plenty of people do. Man, there's a lot there. I don't know that the conference thing matters. Maybe it matters in the years where it feels like it matters. With them aligning with the ACC, it looks terrible now because the ACC's easily the 4th best of the Power 4. You go back historically, and like when I would look at the SEC draft pick totals, there were a lot of years of the ACC. I mean, it's years ago, but the ACC would just be loaded with draft picks. But then you'd be like, how come the teams aren't necessarily better? And then you combine it with this super disappointing group and the expansion that was sort of a desperation that doesn't make a lot of sense from them. It sounds like the relationship is damaged from a PR standpoint. Maybe this week it feels bad. Maybe they get over it. But Notre Dame used to always have such a better schedule because of some of the traditional rivalries that they've now handed in. So, I'm not saying you're wrong, but it just feels so terrible for them, for you to think of them that highly and them to be out of this. So does that mean you think that they should have been in over Miami? Because it sounds like you were fine with the Bamas. What this kind of turned into, Notre Dame Bama.
See, I don't think it was ever Notre Dame Bama. because I don't think the committee wanted to create the same thing, same circumstances as SMU the year before. The committee is made up of a collection, or not the committee, the college football playoff is made up a collection of 10 commissioners. And those commissioners and that 10 includes Pete Vavakwa, who gets to stand basically in Notre Dame. He's their own commissioner. So he has equal footing as these others. And for those commissioners who are ultimately making decisions on behalf of the CFP, those commissioners put a lot of weight on conference championship games. So they do not want to de-incentivize conference championship game participation, which is why I think we need to probably reimagine conference championship games, because they don't want to get rid of them. But at the same time, you don't want them to look as though they don't matter, which they do in this case. And I think that the committee, when they put SMU in the field last year, I knew regardless of how that game went in the ACC championship game, SMU would be in. Because how do you make that call to somebody and say, hey, you're now out because you had to play that 13th game and the team you were being measured against, they didn't have to play it. So I'd never thought that the committee would do that. You cut off your nose to spite your face in that scenario. So they protected conference championships, but the committee must also protect the head-to-head. Because all of a sudden, if you're going off eye test as opposed to head-to-head, which, by the way, head-to-head to me will always carry the day, then you're essentially saying that the regular season outcome didn't matter. And that, I think, is an even more slippery slope. So I thought, based on where the committee went with this ultimate decision, I think they got it right because their hands were tied. But it doesn't mean I don't think Notre Dame's one of the top 5 teams, top 4 teams in college football.
Well, we agree on that. I mean, this goes back to like my first thought on the whole thing. And, one thing that I always learned early on, whether it was Jeff Long, whether it was Kirby, whether it was Rob Mullins, the guys that I used to have on the show pretty regularly with this, is that they were vague strategically. They were vague on purpose because they knew that we couldn't help ourselves. As they said, hey, we think that conference championship is more important than strength of schedule, but head-to-head is more important than this. And we think that this conference is better than that conference. Like very simple things to answer yes or no to. They were always strategically vague not because they're stupid. It's because they were really smart and knew that we would go, wait a minute. Like say we had 10 years of this. We go like, wait a minute, head-to-head in 2022. Like I made the joke that the committee, like we are like the girlfriend that has the best memory ever. And the committee's like, I don't remember. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that did I say that? Because we're going to hold them to this impossible standard and dig through every single sentence that they say. And we try to pretend as if they're capable of having these unassailable positions. And it's just not true because it's a moving target every single year. Like I can envision a scenario where there might be a head to head where the teams are kind of close in the rankings. And I am like, emphatic that I'm like, I don't think that this is going to happen. I changed my mind on the head-to-head with Notre Dame and Miami. Miami coming out fresh off losing, and I'm starting to go, oh, here we go again with the Canes, and Carson Beck starting to look like end of the year Georgia run, or is the end of his Georgia run, Carson Beck, right, where he's indecisive. And I was like, here we go. And at that moment, I felt okay being like, you know what? I just think Notre Dame's that much better than him. And as the rest of the season plays out, I'm like, I can't believe I'm doing this, but I'm like you. Like, if I can't imagine as a guy who didn't play telling someone, whether it's you who played or anyone else who's played, and be like, hey, I'm sorry you won, but that team should go in. I can't imagine doing that to you guys. Yeah.
Not in a game that we actually watched. And I actually went back in preparation for this conversation. I went back and watched the Notre Dame Miami game. And unfortunately for Notre Dame, they didn't even know who they were in that game. But Miami handled them along both lines of scrimmage. Like it was very obvious that Miami was the better team that night. And that is a tough thing, I think, to wrap your head around, because I think Notre Dame can learn from this, by the way. They're 1-3 in their first 2 games of the season the last 2 years. Like they got to start better. Maybe they need to schedule smarter. So they figure out what they have, and they don't have that run into a gauntlet on week 1 and maybe get exposed. That's a scary thought, because that game came up multiple times throughout the last couple of weeks. I do want to ask you about the group of 5, because I'm having a very hard time with this. I will admit I have an appreciation for the Cinderella. There's no one that likes putting the 12 seed over the 5 seed in March Madness more than me. I think I do 4 every year. The 5 seed has never made it out of the first round in any bracket I've ever filled out, which has not always been good for me. But I love Cinderella. And I just don't love Cinderella in football. I'm going to be first and foremost honest. Like, yes, have we seen Boise knock off Oklahoma before? Of course. Have we seen G5 teams beat Power 5 teams before? Absolutely. But the gap in today's day and age with finances and personnel has gotten wider than ever. And yet we're still carving out a place for not one, but two G5 teams. Don't you feel like there needs to be some barrier to entry for a G5 champion? Shouldn't there be some strength of schedule requirement for them to be eligible? How would you solve the group of five dilemma?
I'd only let one team in. So basically, we realize whenever these new systems are put into place, it's really hard to prepare for all the unintended consequences. I think about it all the time with like CBAs. I kind of love that stuff. And it's like, well, if you do this, is this going to happen? And it's like, oh, you know what ended up happening because of that? Then it was this. Like there was something that happened with the NBA stuff where it was like, okay, we're going to take the power back here a little bit, take it away from the players.
Good luck.
Well, they've done a better job with it with the latest stuff with the first and second apron, which I promised to your audience I'm not going to get into all that stuff. But there was basically like, hey, we can't have these guys, the best players. Just like at one point, I think I counted like 7 of the top 10 NBA players were asking out over like a 2 or 3 year period, right?
Yeah,
and that's probably not good for business, right? If you love players and the whole thing, you're like, oh, that's great. Like they're taking the power back. I'm like, yeah, there's a line. There's probably like a line where you might not want this for your league. And so it was like, if you do this, then this is what's going to happen. And then what you ended up happening was players were just signing the extension and they were calling it the NBA transfer portal. So it's like, I'll just sign the extension here. I'm not even worried about free agency. I don't have to do any stuff. And instead of waiting to like a year left on the contract, I'll ask for a trade with 4 years left on the contract because, who cares? So then, whatever. A lot of the first and second apron restrictions are preventing, 3 guys from getting together. It's just not going to be able to happen financially. So I think when you were talking about the 10 commissioners, it's pretty clear on this 12-team structure. It was like, hey, everybody, like you're in it too. Like this is the best way to pass this, right?
Right.
The pitch is everybody's included. And then you have the first year. It's like, how are we doing the seating again? Like, this seems pretty stupid. And to their credit, they fixed it after 1 year. But it's funny that, this is like a human nature thing, is that we can anticipate flaws, but we really don't react until the flaw actually takes place. And what I'm hoping is that's what we're going to have after having 2 group of fives in here. I mean, James Madison's a hell of a story. They played one P4 team, Louisville. You already know this. They lost by 2 touchdowns. It's not the same experience. It is not the same experience. There was maybe some years there with Boise State where you were like, I think this team can play with anybody. And if a field goal had gone in, maybe we would have gotten that chance under a much older system. But they also had to have like carryover momentum perception wise, which is probably a completely unfair thing as we try to figure out like who's good every single week. But I'm sorry, there shouldn't be 2 group of 5 teams in here. And I think it's even more of a disservice to, if you're the 6th seed and you're playing Tulane and you're the 7th seed and you're playing Miami and it's like, hey, this is a playoff. And then people can say to me like, oh, you like it in basketball. To your point, yeah, I like it in basketball because there's a million regular season games. It's 68 teams and like we'll kind of figure it out. And at least there's like one representation from every single conference that's guaranteed. I don't want that in football because it's not the same level. Nobody would ask Pawtucket to be in the MLB playoffs.
I would kind of like to see it personally. I don't know how well it'd work. You probably have some live arms, probably a lot of walks though, as they are developmental guys.
A lot of guys who can't hit the curve,
Yeah, a couple holes in the strike zone. The one thing I'll say about basketball, like people always compare it, like, oh, well, you love basketball. You love March Madness is my favorite event of the year. It's my favorite 3 weeks of sport. Here's the difference: is the guys on offense are also playing defense. So it comes down to 5, 6, 7 guys, whereas in college football, it comes down to 40, 44, 50 guys that are participating in that game. So if one guy's off, it's not going to affect if the running back's off and has a bad game, it's not going to affect the middle linebacker. So the likelihood for an upset's completely different. So I'm with you 100%, but there's got to be something we can do. 1 max, I'm good with it, but we got to cut it off at 1. And they should be the 12 seed every time. And that's all we need to talk about. I'm assuming you're not picking any G5 teams to make a run here. You're sure?
I mean, look, I like what Tulane did this year. I feel a little bit better about them. I think that conference was kind of fun at the top. I think Tulane going into Duke especially against the Tulane transfer story early in the year. Like I was up for that game, and I was like, wow, what a great story. And it sounds like that head coach is like everybody's favorite here. But some people be like, so what do you want? Like Texas in there or whatever, And it's like
Not necessarily.
I'll also get like a lot of like, oh, but in the NFL playoffs, it's fine when it's an 8 and 9 team. Like I think that sucks too.
Yeah.
I actually would argue, more often than not, it ends up being like 3 teams with the best quarterbacks and then one team that has an awesome defense. And you're like, look at this quarterback. Like, I can't believe he's in there. But generally, the conference championship games are controlled in the NFL by like who we think are at that time the era's best QBs. But I'm not sure, like, this is never going to happen. We've yet to see any league start getting rid of games. Okay. They're repackaging, they're adding more and more. So I'm not going to get my way here. But yeah, when I look at like the biggest thing that bothers me is the 5-6 opponents versus the 7-8 opponents. Like that's ridiculous. It's like a bye for some of these teams. And look, we'll have an upset every now and then, but over time, when you have 20-point spreads as opposed to pick'ems, just because you're 6 and the other team is 7, I don't think that that's a fair representation of what teams have had to do in Power 4 conferences.
Especially when the number 7 team in Texas A&M has a 26 spot advantage over the team that's ranked 6 as far as strength of schedule is concerned, that 6 being Ole Miss. I digress.
By the way, I'm totally with you. I do not understand why it was just like it got lost in all the Notre Dame stuff. Ole Miss should not be ahead of A&M. And I don't love A&M's schedule, but there's too many Ole Miss games this year where you're like, what? How is this still a game, Ole Miss? And you're the 5th or 6th best team in the country?
Yeah.
Look, I'll ask you this, but as much as I prefer the SEC's depth this year in some of the Big Ten debates, the top of the SEC is now continued on a couple-year stretch here where these teams are not nearly as clean as those title contenders of what felt like 15 years.
No, I'm with you 100%. I think there are flaws across the board. And it's because they're all tampering with each other and they're all going everywhere else within the SEC footprint. I'll ask you this one more before we get you out of here. You've been so generous with your time. When you watch the field right now and you look at the 10 teams, actually, it's kind of a two-parter. One, is there a team playing in the first round that you think could make a run like Notre Dame last year? And then 2, who do you think is the team to beat this season?
Oh, man. Well, I think I'll start with the first one. I wish I had the stones to pick Indiana in the Big Ten championship game, but I was like freely admitting there's just times where I think this is where the fans get frustrated because it's just really hard to do. Like if you're the college football fan that can somehow limit any preconceived notion, then congratulations to you. Because it's an impossibility, and we have so little to go on year to year in this sport, especially now with the way the rosters turn over. Like, no kidding. Like, there's been so many years. I think when you look at like the top 8, there was like 6 teams that had questions at quarterback. In Ohio State, it totally works out. Texas, it sort of didn't, and then kind of did. Although, look, Arch was okay this year, but not based. It wasn't like he was putting out the expectations. So. That Indiana game against Ohio State, they were clearly the better football team. They could be up 13-10, but at 13-10, I'm like, they're better than them. The same way I felt about when it was 2020 at Autzen, which you could argue with Bama at Georgia, Indiana at Autzen, the 2 best wins of the regular season. So I can't tell I don't have a definitive answer for you on this first part because I can't tell if Indiana, the second time around, if they have to face an Ohio State, like I would pick them against Oregon because even though Oregon – forever gets kind of knocked for like, oh, they're a physical football team. They've had to default to running the football, especially when you look at that Iowa game. They lose the receivers, they lose the right tackle. It's like they've shown me time and time again that they can be as physical as anybody, and yet Indiana bullied them. Indiana bullied Ohio State. Sayan, who I love, looked rattled in a way that I've never seen him rattled before. Now, granted, the second half of their schedule was so easy, they should look super competitive. But I do wonder if saying the second time around we'll go, okay, like here's the better understanding of what these guys are doing and how smart Cignetti and his defensive staff are of just confusing the hell out of people and then also beating them up on top of everybody else. So I kind of lean to Ohio State, just thinking that in a rematch, if they have to play them again, there's just no way. There's no way they'd lose to them twice, right? Go ahead. I mean, if you have something on that,
ahead.
I'd love to hear your thoughts, and then I'll get to kind of like who I think in the first round.
Yeah, I think Ohio State, you had to look circumstantially. There were some things that got saying in that game. The internal pressure was concerning. Some of the issues they had in making sure everyone was blocked up was concerning. The lack of consistent separation that you're getting from elite wide receivers, concerning. But I do think having gone through that, having been to the deep end of the pool, every quarterback learns forever. That's why some guys are playing the best football of their career at 40, 41 years old, because the sheer quantity of information of having seen it and being able to go back and remember that instantaneously can be really valuable. But I do think there were some flaws exposed with Ohio State too. So I no longer think that they're this unbeatable juggernaut. I think they could get got by Georgia. I think they could get got potentially by a team like Ole Miss if it turns into a style of game that Ole Miss wants to play. I think there are other teams that could get them along the way, but gun to head, which team do I want right now to go face this 12-team field? It's still Ohio State, as crazy as that may sound.
No, I don't think it's crazy, but I also can't tell if we're guilty of the exact same thing of like
Sure.
the branding and everything behind it. I mean, I think the most alarming thing that I saw is like when you looked at the one Ohio State-Michigan matchup, it's like, okay, can they run the football? Bo Jackson's been terrific in the second half of the season, and they gashed Michigan. They did not like running against Indiana. And those 2 3rd-and-1 calls where you're throwing with sand and then, you sneak it and it's short on the review, then you miss the field goal. And Indiana does this without Cooper, who's the best receiver, I think, out of the group. And Surratt and Becker was just, he goes off. So look, there's a lot to love about Indiana. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know. I'm probably going to be victim of whatever they look like prior to having to play again here. Look, first round, Alabama is incredibly flawed. They're the most one-dimensional team out of this entire group. Oklahoma's offense has not been the same since Mateer's injury. I can't believe they won the Bama game. I can't believe they won the Tennessee game. But when you look at Oklahoma's entire thing, as bad as this offense is, like if you're going to have a problem with their schedule, like I just can't talk to you. It's like, I don't know about this Oklahoma offense. You're like, go through their schedule. Go through the teams. Like, you want to take away the ranked wins of teams that didn't end up ranked? Well, then you have to go back and like when they lost to Texas, Texas wasn't even ranked. Oddly enough, because Texas was going through their issues. The two teams I think have the best chance, unfortunately, of playing each other, and that's Miami and A&M. I love A&M's defense. I love Elko. I love what they do with the corners. I love how smart they've been on third down this entire time. I love all their skill guys. I thought Marcel Reed being a Heisman favorite was a joke. He's a great athlete. I don't trust him, and I think he has propensity for a massive, massive decision in a huge spot when you're inside the red zone. So Miami, luckily, is probably one of the teams that's established enough. I don't know what you're going to get out of Carson Beck, but look, I feel better about Miami's chances going into College Station and getting a win than I would about some of these other teams. So it really, if you had to say, hey, which two teams do you like out of that first group that's going to play on the first weekend? Unfortunately, they're playing each other because the seeding thing is so messed up.
Yeah, I think that is the game of the week in the first round. I've looked at both those teams, the way they've been built, man, inside out, defensive line, offensive line. Give me that all day long. And quarterbacks that are prone to a mistake or two. Yep. I'll sign up for that one. Rhino, this has been awesome, man. It's always so good to visit with you. So happy for your new venture. You've been doing the podcast game a long time. No one deserves success more than you, but now having the partnership Barstool and DraftKings, I think it's just a match made in heaven, man. So happy for you and look forward to seeing you again soon.
I always wanted to ask you this, and I really appreciate you saying that. I grew up listening to Sean. My first job was play-by-play baseball with the AA Red Sox. I was terrible at it. But
hence the Paul Tuckett reference. Is that what it was?
It was Trenton. I was in Trenton. I was AA. I wasn't good enough for Paul Tuckett.
Okay.
Yeah, but I wanted to stay in the system, obviously. But once Sean sees a call that he's really mad about, whether it's a fumble review at the goal line, or maybe it's like a 4th and 1, but it's out of the shotgun and they try to get a little cute. And that night's cause has been established.
Right.
How do you weave that in when it's like 90 minutes later and it's like and freeze for whatever reason, Greg? Do you start prepping mentally going, this might be the cause tonight for the broadcast. Let me start thinking about avenues to respond. How do you work that into everything else you have to pay attention to?
There are that there will be sticking points throughout the broadcast, and it might start, for example, in the ACC championship game. It started as early as the coin toss because Tony Elliott deferred for Virginia when in reality, and we had talked to both coaching staffs, they talked about the importance of the first drive and how the rhythm for Duke was completely disrupted because Virginia did on a 7.5 play drive, and there was a commercial break, a touchdown, commercial break, kickoff, commercial break. And sure enough, Virginia gets the ball. They decide to kick off. And then Duke takes it right down the field for 10 minutes and kills the offensive rhythm for Virginia. So you got to have your antenna up early because it might be that one thing that happens even before we go on the air that is going to be a huge talking point throughout the game. So yeah, Sean's the best at that, finding a reason why this might matter. And then sure enough, it's going to incorporate its way into the show at some point or another throughout, for sure.
Yeah, the Duke thing was perfect. I mean, it was kind of the story in that opening drive, so it was great. But I feel like I can always tell maybe during the production meeting process of doing a game, I'm like, oh, he doesn't – I don't know that there's a ton of Hugh Freeze guys out there to begin with, but I was like, was Hugh a little icy with my guy Sean? You don't have to add anything to that, but I've been listening to him for decades, and I think I have a good radar of when I'm like, this could be something we hear about in the fourth quarter.
And he definitely knows how to play it, man. I think he's unbelievable. Sometimes I sit next to him, and I'm doing the game. I'm like, I just marvel at like what he sees and his calls. Like, I'm just sitting there as a fan, just like all of y'all. I'm like, dude, he nailed that call. That was unbelievable. I just can't even speak. And you're supposed to lay out after the touchdown, let the environment speak. But it's like, I can't speak because it was that good. Like, I mean,
but there was a call in the Duke UVA game where it was shocking to me because I thought he missed something. And actually what it was is that he saw a flag.
Correct.
And therefore held off on giving you the full version of what that, I think it was the touchdown in the left corner. And I was shocked going like, did Sean miss something? Because he doesn't miss anything. It wasn't that he
was off.
It was the out of bounds thing. So he was subduing himself because he knew that this may not be as big, and then kind of let the moment happen. And it wasn't like he was laying out. He was laying out in the smartest way. And it was so funny to me because at first I'm like, it's almost like when I think Tirico mispronounces a word, I'll rewind it because I'm blown away. And then I realize he didn't. And like, I was like, oh, he didn't. He didn't. There's a few people that are really special at this. And obviously you work with one. So thanks, man.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. And I was lucky enough to share the mic with you for the last half hour, 40 minutes or so, because I get to share it with a special one today. So appreciate your time, man. Always fun to visit with you and always appreciate your perspective.
Thanks, Greg. Great job on the games this year. Appreciate it.
That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. We continue to encourage you to check out Ryen's podcast, Ryen Russillo, Russillo. It's presented by DraftKings. Go and check it out on the YouTube page. Go and check it out on the podcast platform. Ryen does an amazing job, and he loves college football. He's not in the weeds of college football quite like we are, but he observes from a fan's perspective. He knows ball, and it'll be great for you to kind of hear his take on it moving forward. It also would be helpful if you could subscribe to our podcast, wherever that may be. So if you're new to our show, or maybe you followed Ryen here, go ahead and subscribe. It's awesome. It's free, and we will provide the content for you if you want to get a little more knowledgeable about what we do here in college football. So for all of us here at ACF, for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack intern, Sam, I'm Greg. We hope you have an awesome day, and remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.